perhaps odd-sounding to the outside world, have helped to make the cut and thrust of debate less personal and direct, and have helped in a small way to maintain the dignity of the House and the honour of its members. Because politics is an honourable pursuit, and in my experience of over 30 years in public life, the vast majority of those who seek political office are motivated to improve the lives of others and fight for what they believe to be.
Theresa May there speaking at the Institute for Government. You can see there, let me just get out of the way of the picture, you can see there the lectern, the podium in front of the door of number 10, outside number 11. Staff serving the Prime Minister have been gathering, waiting to hear the statement that we're expecting in the next 10 minutes or so. Andrew Griffith, for example, we can see standing there, the Prime Minister's Director of Policy and other members of the staff standing outside at number 11, gathering to hear the resignation statement of the Prime Minister, expected at 12:30. They're currently plugging in the podium outside number 10.
So this is what traditionally happens when a Prime Minister stands down. You can see on your screen there's James Dudridge in the middle with a bright coloured tie. To his right is Andrew Griffiths. He was the Prime Minister's policy chief. He used to be the chief financial officer, actually, at Sky PLC. Behind Andrew Griffith, you can see Gito Hari. He's the Prime Minister's Director of Communications. And I'm wondering, too, whether Carrie Johnson might come out. I remember when the Prime Minister was appointed to the post that she stood there with members of staff. If we look down the other side of the street, I don't think you can see this, but there are MPs also gathering. Now, I don't know if we can flip the camera around, but there, I can see Conor Burns, one of the Prime Minister's oldest allies. I don't know if you can see, there's people in the way, but yes, there you go. You can see Robert Peston there, and ITV, all the crews along the street, but you can see there MPs, and there was some talk this morning that the number 10 team had asked for MPs to come behind Boris Johnson when he comes out, and some of them are gathering there. Not a huge group, I have to say, but there they all are. I think is that Heather Wheeler at the front, Sophie,
I think it is
in the white jacket, embracing some of her colleagues.
You can see her embracing some people there. As you say, Johnny Mercer, I can also just glimpse behind that lamppost.
There's Alan Mack there, who is, I think, a whip. I don't know all of their names, actually, but there you've got some...
Daniel Karinsky and Peter Brown also there. As you say there, not perhaps the largest grouping of MPs ever, but certainly it does feel like that edict has gone out from number 10, that more supportive MPs should come to the streets ready to hear the Prime Minister's statement. So what we have here is, outside the door of number 11, the members of staff at number 10 and number 11 coming out to hear. And the other end of the street is the gathering of MPs as well. So everyone really getting ready here. The last check's been made to the podium. They are getting those wires ready to hear from Boris Johnson. It's a speech that he didn't want to have to make. We are expecting him to come out of that door shortly to give the resignation statement that he's been resisting for the last few days. But it will be, we expect, very different in tone to resignation speeches of the past. He's determined to keep going on in the role as the kind of caretaker leader, if you like, after setting out a timetable for his resignation for some months, until the autumn, he says, until the next person is appointed. Beth.
If you just can pan over to the team, there's just been a run of new people now coming out. All of the number 10 team now coming out, filling up the street, and I can see there his communications trees. There's Rosie Bates-Williams, there's Steph Liz. You can see, if you move to number 11, at the end you can see now his comms team have come out, all his senior members of staff, they're now waiting, and you can see the street has moved. The lady in the floral dress, like behind Simone Finn, Baroness Finn, one of his key advisors, and was once actually an advisor, do you remember, to Michael Gove. She's there, one of his, I think she's a deputy chief of staff. So there's Boris Johnson's team now all out there as we await for the Prime Minister. I have to say though, Sophie, in terms of the appeal to get MPs out, there's not a massive group of MPs there, is there?
There isn't, certainly. And I think we should be able to hopefully have a look at some of the MPs who are gathered there. And as you say, Beth, to be honest, if it is true, which it seems like it was, that number 10 have made the appeal for MPs to...
Sorry, Cameron,
have made the MPs,
yeah,
trying to get to have a look at the MPs who've gathered.
Yeah.
As Beth was just saying, as number 10 made the appeal for the supportive MPs to come to the street to show their support for Boris Johnson. That is not a great number of MPs who have actually answered that call. A few people that we've managed to spot: Conor Burns, Alan Mack, Heather Wheeler, Peter Bone, Daniel Korinsky, but clearly that is not a huge number of MPs, and perhaps suggesting there that even though the MPs have answered Boris Johnson's call and he has managed to refill his
guys happy with the audio? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good stuff.
I mean, looking at that, I don't know how many MPs would you say there? 30, 40?
I reckon about 30.
I mean, for a Prime Minister that 2.5 years ago won a majority of 80, the most successful Conservative leader at the ballot box since Margaret Thatcher, totally crushing David Cameron at the ballot box at least, and really that isn't a massive group of MPs here today, given how many opened their seats to him back in 2019. But I think it reflects, Sophie, the bitterness between this Prime Minister and his parliamentary party. I was saying yesterday in the Commons, it was visceral, it was vicious. It gets like that towards the end because for Boris Johnson, he was in the fight for his political life. And when you get to the end game like that, it gets nasty. And it really did deteriorate the atmosphere. And obviously a number of MPs have thought, no, I'm not going to come along and stand behind you. I think the MPs might be come and stand behind him. I guess he would like that as a show of strength, but let's see what they do.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, because if it is intended as a show of strength, which you have to assume it is, if you can only muster up about 30 MPs, you do have to wonder if that was perhaps the show of strength that was intended.
Yeah.
Jacob Rees-Mogg and Johnny Mercer, we can now see coming out of the
Jolly
door
on,
number 11.
Sorry, if you move back, I'm sorry, the poor cameraman. Can you move? We're trying to show you. Sorry, let me talk to you about it as the camera moves over.
We can now hopefully cut the shot outside number 11.
Sorry, we interrupted. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, one of the Prime Minister's key lieutenants, there he is. You can see him. He's come out of number 11. Let's see if he'll give us a wave. No, he's not.
From the lectern,
and Johnny Mercer actually is that. And that's Chris Heaton-Harris. He is the chief whip, and that's Nigel Adams, one of Prime Minister's key. And here is Carrie Johnson and the baby, Romy, her 9-month-old. They just came on the trip to Chogham with us, actually. It was lovely. I got a little sight of that lovely baby. There is Carrie Johnson, and next to her, Nadine Dorries, the Prime Minister's closest ally. And look, there's the little baby. And I don't know where Wilf is. They've got a toddler as well.
I mean, to be honest, probably quite risky having a toddler out on the Downing Street.
Well, the toddler did not come on the trip, which, as anyone knows who takes a toddler on a plane, is probably best advised. So look, there we have it. Chris Heaton-Harris, there's Carrie. There's giving us a little wave. She looks actually lovely, doesn't she, in that red dress? And the little baby, Romney, there she is. She's a sweet little baby. She's only 9 months old. And Nadine Dorries. And we are waiting for the Prime Minister. The door is opening. Here he comes. Let's listen in.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time. Thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019. And of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. And let me say now to the people of Ukraine that I know that we in the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes. And at the same time, in this country, we've been pushing forward a vast program of investment in infrastructure and skills and technology, the biggest in a century, because if I have one insight into human beings, it is that genius and talent and enthusiasm and imagination are evenly distributed throughout the population, but opportunity is not. And that's why we must keep levelling up, keep unleashing the potential of every part of the United Kingdom. And if we can do that in this country, we will be the most prosperous in Europe. And in the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much, and when we have such a vast mandate, and when we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls, even in mid-term after quite a few months of pretty relentless sledging, and when the economic scene is so difficult domestically and internationally. And I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services. And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support as I can. And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks. I want to thank Carrie and our children and all the members of my family who have had to put up with so much for so long. I want to thank the peerless British civil service for all the help and support that you have given our police, our emergency services, and of course, our fantastic NHS, who at critical moment helped to extend my own period in office, as well as our armed services and our agencies that are so admired around the world, and our indefatigable Conservative Party members and supporters, whose selfless campaigning makes our democracy possible. I want to thank the wonderful staff here at Chequers, here at Number 10, and of course at Chequers, and our fantastic prop force detectives, the one group, by the way, who never leak. Above all, I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on. being Prime Minister is an education in itself. I've travelled to every part of the United Kingdom, and in addition to the beauty of our natural world, I've found so many people possessed of such boundless British originality and so willing to tackle old problems in new ways that I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Boris Johnson there talking about how sad he is to give up the best job in the world, but them's the breaks. Thank you for an incredible mandate, he said, to the people who gave him the mandate after that 2019 general election victory. But the Darwinian system, he said, will now produce a new leader. Let's go to Beth Rigby, shall we? Beth, what did you make of that statement?
Well, it was kind of trademark, but it was vintage Boris Johnson, wasn't it? It was, as I thought it would be. He was talking about his greatest hits. It had humour in there. It was tinged with sadness. And it was also very dignified, actually. A very dignified speech, I thought, in which he held his head high. He accepted that he didn't want to leave. And he gave, well, one thing about Boris Johnson is he doesn't really give you much emotion, but there, what he does is he uses language to show the emotion. And some of the things that, struck me, he said, of course it was painful not to be able to see through the project. And as I said before, he rolled out the greatest hits. He said how proud he was to have got Brexit done. He said, and to give the country back the power to make its own laws. That's how he put it. He talked about levelling up. We must keep on levelling up, and we must fight for the freedom of Ukraine for as long as it takes. He then went on to say, of course, it is painful not to see the projects through that I wanted to. And then he said, in a characteristically humorous way, he said, but the herd has moved, and when the herd moves, it moves quickly. And then he said, no one is remotely indispensable. He'd said how much he wanted to stay on, and then he said that the Darwinian system, as he put it, will produce another leader who he said he would give as much support as he could. And then he touched upon his divisiveness, because he's batted it off all the time. But he said, I know that some of you, many of you, he said, will be relieved and some disappointed by my resignation. And he said he was so sad to be leaving the best job in the world, as he described it. And then he finished off by thanking the public for giving him, as he said, the immense privilege of being able to serve as the Prime Minister. He said being Prime Minister is an education in itself. And he said about the boundless British energy and enthusiasm that he had met around the country. And then he finally ended with, he is a journalist, he's a good writer, and he does good oratory. He said, it might feel dark now, but the future together is golden. And with that, the applause, there were no tears, massive applause. And he went back and he also thanked his wife, Carrie Johnson, who was watching on with their 9-month-old baby, Romney.
Yeah, it was, I thought, Beth. It was interesting talking beforehand about the emotion of other resignation statements we've seen. And in recent days, we've been told that Boris Johnson is in buoyant spirits. And there were no tears, obviously, from the Prime Minister. But I did get the sense we got a flicker of emotion from him, perhaps more than he usually shows, when he was talking about how sad he was to get up the best job in the world, as you were saying, talking quite frankly about the reason that he's continued to fight on so long, perhaps a little bit of an acknowledgement that he has been trying to hang on to the job until it just became impossible.
Yeah, and he talked about, he started off by thanking the British people for that huge mandate. He wanted it to be known that he was a winner once. and he won the biggest majority since Margaret Thatcher. And he wanted to remind everyone of that. And he explained that that was the reason that he clung on for so long, that he felt that he had been given a mandate by the people, and that mandate he felt stood, but he said, as he acknowledged, the herd moved against him, and once that happened, there really was nowhere else for him to go. But, you know, I didn't expect to see Boris Johnson shed a tear. The most emotion I've ever seen in Boris Johnson is him sometimes drops his head, but he wanted that to be a moment where he projected confidence and optimism. They are the tickets, if you like, that attracted the public to him in the first place, the can-do optimism, the Boris Johnson boosterism, as we used to call it. And really that speech, I think, had bucket loads of that in terms of the delivery. But also, look, it's hard to hear any Prime Minister talk about having to leave that job. It was hard to hear David Cameron do it, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, because, you know, as he said, it's the best job in the world. I'm sad to leave it. I didn't want to go, but I had to leave. And that must be absolutely brutal to have to do that in the moment. But, you know, he was very composed. He was upbeat, and I did, as I said, I felt that was vintage Boris Johnson. He gave us his best version of himself there.
Yes, certainly. You can see around us.
Oh,
they are literally packing up at our feet.
I think, yeah, we are being packed up.
I mean, this is the brutality of politics. I think, you know, he comes out there for the big moment,
should give us
and
a
then
wave for the camera.
You can see very quickly things are getting let.
Yeah, they're the guys. So all the cables were running along here, and now it's all been packed up.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for your analysis, Beth Rigby there, political editor. Well, that is it. We hear, of course, the speech from Boris Johnson, the resignation speech, where he spoke about ran through his greatest hits, that, of course, a big majority, but also expressed his frustration in not being able to really follow through on some of the mandate that he was given in terms of big policies. We can bring in Adam Bolton now, the former Sky News political editor and presenter, to discuss a bit of that. And I don't know if you agree, Adam, detect a tinge of regret in the Boris Johnson speech, saying we must keep levelling up, that it was frustrating not to be able to continue in the work that he'd started. And it really has been a premiership marked by outside events, COVID, the war in Ukraine. Do you think that will be something that Boris Johnson, I guess, will regret looking back on his legacy?
Well, I'll leave aside the emotion, if I may. The fact is, this is a massive political humiliation for Boris Johnson, who won a great general election victory, or led his party to a great general election victory, but as he admitted, lost the confidence of his own party within the space of 2 years since that general election. I think what's more important, really, is trying to work out what's going to happen now. Boris Johnson, he didn't actually use the words, "I resign," but he's clearly on the way out. And let's look at his words. He said, "I have today appointed a cabinet to serve as I will until a new leader is in place." And he also said that the parliamentary party, the 1922 committee, will announce a timetable next week. Now, that holds open the possibility that if they go through the full leadership election process of MPs choosing two candidates and then those candidates being voted on by the Conservative Party, that he could actually have quite a long caretaker period as he sees it. Of course, the alternative, and maybe he's put the ball back into the parliamentary party, is that the MPs here, come up with one candidate who would effectively take over before the end of the month. Now, we saw this before with the transition to Theresa May and in opposition to Michael Howard. Now, if that happens, then we could have a very, very short transition period for both Mr. Johnson and this cabinet. But again, he's not making it easier for anyone else. Yeah, I mean, he's been in office. He highlighted the things that happened in office. there will be disputes as to how well the government handled the COVID crisis, for example. There will be disputes about whether Brexit has indeed been done. And there will also be disagreements as to whether in other areas of policy Mr. Johnson has achieved very much at all. But the fact of the matter is he is now out. He will be going at the very latest by this October and the next party conference. And as Enoch Powell famously said, all political careers end in failure.
Or they certainly do, don't they, Adam? Adam, thank you very much for guiding us through some of the likely consequences now that Boris Johnson has set out a timetable for resigning as the leader of the Conservative Party and also as Prime Minister. I guess the question, of course, many are asking is whether or not he can continue until the autumn. We've seen Liz Truss on Twitter in the last few moments saying the Prime Minister has made the right decision. The government under Boris's leadership had many achievements, delivering Brexit, vaccines and back in Ukraine. We need calmness and unity now, she says, and to keep governing, that's the critical bit, while a new leader is found. Meanwhile, another MP texts me to say he's just tried to gaslight the party, utter narcissism to the end. So I think that certainly gives you a bit of a sense of the range of reactions of MPs to that speech by Boris Johnson and potential difficulties, I guess, in uniting the party even in the months ahead. Well, let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor now, shall we, Sam Coates. He's in Parliament's Central Lobby. Sam, we've been talking to MPs. What's the reaction?
That's right, Sophie. So, yes, a very striking, very important moment, constitutional moment, as Boris Johnson signals that he will stand down, but only when there is a new Conservative Party leader to take over from him. An interim cabinet, as it were, will steward the country up until that point. What do MPs make of it? Will that position hold? Well, let's get the first reaction from a Tory MP. I'm joined by Jonathan Gullis, who called for Boris Johnson to go a couple of days ago, having previously been a staunch supporter. What did you make of the speech?
I thought it was moving. It was difficult to watch, to be honest with you, Sam. Look, as you say, up until recently, I've been very loyal to the Prime Minister because I believe he is instinctively a good man. And I'm grateful for all he did for Stoke-on-Trent with the 56 million from the Levelling Up Fund, 17.6 million Kidsgrove Town deal, 31 million to Bus Back Better and 500 new Home Office jobs. This is a man who understood where Stoke-on-Trent, North, Kidsgrove and Talk was. It's where he's invested. It's where he's made sure that he delivered on that Brexit delay that had been happening. So it was difficult to see, but I sadly came to the conclusion, as you say, a number of days ago, that this simply was untenable, and it's painful to watch, but it's the right thing that he's gone.
He called it eccentric for the party to kick him out. There wasn't much thanks from him to the Conservative Party for what they've done. Was there any twinge of guilt, any twinge of regret when you watched that speech?
When I made that decision to resign as a parliamentary private secretary, which I appreciate is at the very bottom of the ladder in terms of ministerial roles, I knew that once I made that decision, that it was the right decision. I haven't regretted it once. I'm just sad that it came to this because I think he is, as I say, a good person instinctively, and I think that he could have been and should have been a great Prime Minister, but sadly, just some poor choices over too long a time. They just meant that his position was untenable.
There is a very big live argument going on at the moment about whether or not Boris Johnson should be allowed to continue under the timetable that he wants, which is possibly some weeks, if not months, until the next Conservative Party leader and hence Prime Minister is chosen. Now, that could be September or October. Do you think Boris Johnson should stay in Downing Street until then?
My personal preference would have been, because of especially the last 24 hours and the scenes that we've seen since then, that Boris would have gone entirely and we would have installed Dominic Raab as an interim Prime Minister and then with the interim cabinet until we had a new leader. However, I trust Sir Graham Brady to act on the behalf of backbenchers. I trust the interim cabinet. There are very good people, so Robert Buckland, who I don't believe would have gone in there had they not known that they feel that they would be making sure that there were firm checks and balances on Boris whilst he continues, obviously, as you say, until we elect a new leader. So if that's what the senior members of the party have felt that they can live with and that government will, most importantly, function and continue to deliver, especially for the people that I'm proud to represent, then I can live with that.
Do you think that's to settle with the Conservative Party as far as it's possible to judge, because we've only had this speech in a few minutes? Do you think colleagues will accept that timetable? Or, as you say, given the events of the last 36, 48 hours, do you think that there will continue to be a debate on that matter?
there probably will be a small debate on that matter, but I think we have to just bring a closure. We don't need to keep having rows internally. We now need to focus on making sure that we get a timetable in place to elect a new leader, that new leader get installed as soon as possible with their cabinet, and that we then get, most importantly, back on top of delivering for the people and focusing on the big issues of the day.
It's quite a wide-ranging cabinet from different wings of the party, clearly, to steward through this difficult time. But do you think there should be limits on what the government over the next few weeks and months while Boris Johnson is still there, effectively as a caretaker, should be able to do? Can Boris Johnson make some of the decisions he would have made anyway, or should he just try and run as steady, a low profile, as unambitious a ship as possible, because those will be matters for the next Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister, as he still is, Boris Johnson, was elected on a Conservative manifesto. We should be delivering that manifesto. So anything within that, absolutely, we should be focusing on. And also, internationally, we can't suddenly stop helping our friends in Ukraine. The Northern Ireland Protocol is something that clearly needs solving and that Boris and the Cabinet agreed to. So with issues like that, we should be absolutely going hell for leather on.
But there is a debate in number 10 about whether or not to push the button on a packet of tax cuts, changing economic direction. Are those the kind of decisions you want to see with Boris Johnson still in charge?
I trust that the Cabinet, as it now is, will come round the table, look at the situation. We have a global crisis when it comes to inflation. We're seeing energy bills rising. Constituents in my area are clearly worried, particularly about October. If it looks like we need to take action sooner rather than later, then yes, I would be supportive of any action that needs to be taken to protect households with their incomes, but also with the rising cost of food and energy.
What if there are big issues like the Northern Ireland Protocol that could be up for debate in the leadership contest? Do you think that the party should just press on with that bill despite the international ire, difficult conversations, Europe not really responding because they see a change of leadership in Britain on the way? How can you deal with those kind of situations with a caretaker Prime Minister maybe for 2 months?
Well, the Northern Ireland Protocol, if I remember correctly, Sam, you may correct me, didn't have any Conservative Member of Parliament vote against it. There was a large amount of support for it, and therefore I feel that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet have a mandate from the Conservative Party backbenches to crack on with those issues.
Jonathan Gullis, thank you very much
Thank you
indeed.
very much.
Clearly, difficult day for Tory MPs, but there no regrets whatsoever from one person who has called for Boris Johnson to stand down.
Really interesting stuff there, Sam, and certainly from some of the people that Sam has been speaking to and MPs more generally as well, it does feel as though not everyone is convinced that Boris Johnson has bought himself enough time to continue until the autumn. A couple of tweets I just want to bring you now from two people who we are potentially expecting to throw their hat into the ring for a leadership contest. Firstly, Tom Tugendhat saying it's the right call by Boris Johnson to resign. He delivered Brexit, rolled out the vaccine and led on Ukraine. Now we need a clean start. Well, let's contrast that to Liz Truss, shall we, the Foreign Secretary. The Prime Minister's made the right decision. She says the government under Boris's leadership had many achievements, delivering Brexit, vaccines and backing Ukraine. She then says we need calmness and unity now and to keep governing while a new leader is found. Well, let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, shall we? And Beth, it does feel, doesn't it, like the starting gun has already been fired.
Oh.
The jostling has started.
Yeah, I mean, look, the starting gun was fired weeks ago, actually. This has been going on for weeks. MPs trying to corral support, taking soundings from backbenchers to see who might be in their camp. But now these leadership bids that we've all been talking about behind the scenes are going to come out into the open.